Welcome in. Hail to the podcast. Regularly, well, maybe not regularly scheduled, a little early tonight, 7 p.m., but here on a Sunday night. Hail to the podcast brought to you by Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan athletics for the Rivals Network, which guess what means you can find us at michigan.rivals.com. Too easy. I'm Trevor McCue, senior editor, Maize and Blue Review. Joined as always, Intel insider, publisher, Mr. Maize and Blue Review himself, Josh Henschke.
Hello.
I was trying to think if there was something I wanted to serve up to you, and now I don't remember. I'm taking the glasses off. They're fogging up. It's not going to work. This is why
we're off to a flying start here.
I didn't wear them forever because of that exact reason. They fog up so easily. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
But you have contacts, don't you?
No, I don't wear any glasses.
Oh, you're lucky. I could never touch my eyes, so that's why.
Yeah, the only glasses I wear are the blue light blockers, but yeah, I'm really worn lately.
I had awesome vision most of my life, and then the gray shows up, the eyes go bad. Grr, old man.
I'm waiting for it. I totally realized that my microphone was halfway across my desk and not in front of me. So
I can hear you loud and clear. So
well, here we are. So what an absolute mess. But here we go. We're starting now.
Yeah, we're good. We have a loaded show. We're going to get into Michigan football. Spring practices more than half over now. Feel comfortable talking about some dudes on the hype train, names we've been hearing the most from coaches, and intel that we've gathered, some of the players, etc. We'll go through the hype train and some of those names getting the most hype. So make sure to throw in the comments players maybe you're most excited about or you've heard the most about coming in through spring practice. And we want to get into basketball. There's some things that have actually happened and been confirmed now. There's some things that are heavy leans and stuff got different variances of smoke. So we'll go through the things we know, some of the things we think we know, and then we'll just talk some rumors because that's fun, right? But Dusty May off and running. I think we can say the one thing we've heard pretty consistently is the man does not punch in or out. He has been working and grinding since he started. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Before we get started, though, I would like to shout out our sponsors for this podcast. My friend West at My Perfect Franchise. If you're looking for, a change of pace, a new career, something that you can kind of, be in your control. Wes is the perfect guy to reach out to, and his services are 100% free. So totally a risk-free phone call. And, if that's the only thing that happens is just a phone call, hey, it's free. And, you never know where it'll lead, basically. So would you like to escape corporate America for good? Maybe you'd like to start a business on the side and keep your corporate gig. Wes can help. Wes is a franchise consultant as well as a business owner and can help you find a franchise that fits your skill set, financial requirements, how much time you have to commit, and more. A franchise is a business startup and operations kit, perfect for those with general business skills, but who may not have specific knowledge on starting and running a small business. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership. You can reach him by phone at 512-970-7478. Again, that's 512-970-7478. Or see him on the web at myperfectfranchise.net/about-west. And again, thank you, West, for sponsoring the show and sponsoring our weekly Q&As. And if you're not a subscriber, please head over to michigan.rivals.com and join us to get all your questions answered that may not be answered here on the show or on social media. Always love doing those every week. And thank you to West for being able to make that happen for us. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
The Q&As are fun because obviously we talk Michigan sports and intel, and then people ask a lot of random questions too, and it's just fun going back and forth. We've also had, that's how we discover info. People ask us a question and we're like, what are you talking about? And then we dig in and find out, oh, hey, there is something to it. So I'm a big fan of our Q&A. Our subscribers make those a lot of fun. So
yep.
All right, we are 5 minutes in, and I'd argue we're already behind. So let's get into it. Michigan football hype train. Look, this is a few weeks of spring practice. I don't think any of us, well, I know Josh isn't. Josh will never do this, make a huge proclamation or overreact to the spring news. But at this point, between players and coaches and media availability that we've had, some folks that we've had at practice sharing intel with us and the intel Josh has gathered, some names have kind of come to the front of the train, if you will.
Yep.
And it's fair to just talk about what we've been hearing and what we think that means moving forward. Obviously, there are plenty of hype train passengers that have not translated into the season, but hey, this is where we are. This is what we're going to talk about with football. So let's start with the offense. We've been talking about quarterback a ton, obviously. Okay. We will continue to talk about quarterback a ton. It's going to be a storyline until it's not. And then even then in the season, it's still going to linger. But I think we could say a little bit about every quarterback. I think Davis Warren has shown folks that he was injured last year. The shoulder's feeling better. He's done better in camp than people expected. Jaden Davis, as a freshman, has impressed some folks. The thing he is dealing with is the thing we expected. We talked about that when he committed. Some mechanics issues. He's got a really long, delivery. Maybe that's impacting him. Okay. Jaden Denegal's had some good days, some tough days like everyone else. Yeah. Haven't really seen him rise up, so to speak. And Jack Tuttle hasn't been contributing. He's dealing with an injury, so he's kind of lingering there and hasn't been able to make a statement. Mm-hmm. Alex Orji is the name we hear the most. And in the same category as the Denegals and the Davis Warren and Jaden Davis. He's had good days, he's had bad. Josh has shared that. But he is just the name that just keeps coming up the most. The staff, the way they talk about him, right? And then even the players, the way they talk about him as well. It feels like, again, without Tuttle, it's kind of tough to say, but it just continues to feel like Alex Orji is the guy that they're wanting to go take this job. He hasn't yet. He won't, right? This is going to linger for a little bit. Yeah. But out of the group, he continues to be the name we hear the most in terms of hype. And again, it's not full-blooded. There is some, hey, he's got to work on this and that. But if you want to break into Orji a little bit or whatever else you think about the other quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think the one thing right now from anyone that I'm getting spring practice intel from is that this thing is nowhere close to being decided. Yeah. Nowhere near figuring this thing out. And yeah, probably Orji has the most hype right now because he was the guy that Michigan trotted out in some pretty big time situations outside of JJ McCarthy. So, rightfully so, he probably does have most of the hype. I haven't heard anything specific that says that he's just outshining the rest. I think that unless they, and this is hypothetical, unless they dip into the portal, that he might be the guy that just kind of just rides it out and wins it out at the end. But you're right. Everyone's had their ups and downs. I think, from a stability standpoint, I think Alex Orji's been the most, leveled. I wouldn't say consistent because he's had his fair share of inconsistencies as well. But I think he's had less of them, compared to a Denegal and Davis Warren and Jaden Davis as well. So, we'll kind of see. It's still very early. Again, and as you said, I'm not going to make any proclamations. I mean, is it probably if Michigan doesn't find a slam dunk in the portal, is it going to be Alex Orji? Probably, yeah, it probably will be. But I think they would like Orji to take the starting role, honestly. And I think a lot of people would like to see that as well. But I think a lot more has to happen in order for them to get that level of comfort right now. A lot more consistency from, not just Orji, but everyone else as well. Jaden Davis has had good days too. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not like he's just floundering. I mean, he's had his ups and downs. He makes a lot of freshman mistakes, which is to be expected. Do I predict him stealing playing time? Probably not right now. I think he's probably a year out. Will he see the field at all this year in backup roles? I don't know. I just think at the end of the day, I think it comes down to whatever Sherrone and Kirk Campbell feel comfortable with the most leading this offense, who can not create turnovers, and most importantly, who can lead scoring drives. So You've seen a little bit of both. I know it's been discussed the last couple of practices that has been pretty even amongst the offense and defense, which wasn't exactly that way the last couple of weeks. I mean, you've seen, I heard primarily the defense was having much better days than the offense, but that's usually always the case when, a spring starts up and a fall starts up. And then there's a little bit of lag period for the offense to start catching up. And I think now you're starting to see that. So, I think Michigan will be fine getting through spring without having a clear number one guy, and it's not going to be decided in the spring unless Alex Orji is just turned, or anyone really turns into this just mythical quarterback that just doesn't make any mistakes. I mean, you have a lot of time, and I don't think they're in a rush. They don't need to be in a rush. Take as much time as you need. I mean, hell, they could decide an hour before kickoff if they wanted to, so it's still evolving. It's going, it's going, it's a developing type of thing. I'll be curious to see how this develops over the next couple of weeks or so. I know that there was some interception issues with a lot of the quarterbacks, which I don't know if that speaks to just the bad quarterback play or good defensive back play. I think, it's probably a little in the middle, somewhere in the middle of that. But again, I'm just so not concerned with the quarterback play right now. Especially in spring. The portal is coming quick. I think it's the 16th, actually. I think we were saying it wrong. It's the 16th, but either way, it's the 15th, 16th. That's coming up pretty quickly here. So we should get a good look at, if there's any surprise names that enter. I would not be surprised if Michigan gets involved. So we just kind of, I'm not in a rush. Again, I'm not going to make any major proclamations. I'm not even going to say anyone's in the lead, because I don't think there is. I've been told so many times that this thing is even deadlocked back and forth and no one's really emerged yet. Do I think that's a bad thing? No, I don't. I mean, yeah, you obviously want a guy, but if this was August and we're talking about no one has emerged, or things are even, then yeah, I'd be a little concerned. But April, there's so much time, and now the offensive staff is together and can gel and finally move forward. I think you'll start to see things evolve moving forward, and again, Michigan can address multiple positions on offense through the portal. I mean, they probably should add a receiver or two into the mix, and that can change the face of an offense too. So there's just a lot of variables out there to really kind of, to make a long-winded response short here. A lot of variables.
Too late, brother.
Yeah, a lot of variables that still need to happen in order for me to be declaring a starting quarterback during spring.
Yeah, I continue to say, though, and Kirk Campbell said this, and I think it stuck out to me about being the starting quarterback and everything that goes into it. And it's not just, how they're doing in drills. It's about how they carry themselves, everything else. And I mean, Orji is just consistently front and center with everything, whether it's the pictures, the social media stuff, the interactions with players. He's the guy other players bring up. So look, whether he's going to take the job or not, we don't know. Without Tuttle there, it's interesting, but he's just constantly out front. Mm-hmm. It's just the name that's being feasted. So yeah, he's got to win it. That's what it comes down to. And again, without Tuttle there, who continues to feel like the high floor guy. But I was going to pick a running back, but I don't think I can anymore, because they've all kind of had different levels of hype. So we know how much Donovan Edwards is bulked up and what's been said about his resurgence and rejuvenation and where he's at mentally and taking on a leadership role. Kalel Mullings is the opposite. Sounds like he's actually thinned out a little bit. Not shocking. This was a guy whose initial weight program was to be a linebacker at Michigan. He's still going to be a big boy, right? Yeah. Him standing, I still remember after the Nebraska game, Mullings and Stewart were next to each other, and I'm like, this is an edge and a running back, and they look identical. This is crazy, right? So, but yeah, Mullings kind of adapting his role. We heard them talk about Thunder and Lightning, and a guy that got a lot of hype last spring, with his opportunities as well, and then dealt with some injuries in the season. We were hearing a lot of good things about Ben Hall, and then today, Blake Corum, during an interview at the Tigers game, specifically called out Hall. One, he said, gave props to Donovan, saying he's going to have a big year, but he called out Ben Hall and specifically said he reminds me of me. So, we've heard that before in terms of the shiftiness and the cuts and the vision. Not saying Ben Hall is about ready to replace the greatest running back in Michigan football history, but when Blake Corum says, hey, that guy's going to have a good year, he reminds me a lot of me, I think that's high praise. So, look, we know Michigan likes to run the ball. We know what that means, but it sounds like a very, very solid three is forming with Mullings, Edwards, and potentially Hall in that other spot.
Yeah, that's kind of what we expected, and really, that's not the first time that we've heard that Hall has been compared to Blake either. They're both kind of shorter backs in stature, but kind of thick-bodied guys that can, either run through you or run around you. So I'll be really curious to see what Hall's development looks like under Tony Alford. He's an intriguing back, and I know I personally was kind of down on the signing because you didn't really, it felt a lot like it was a reach signing because you're talking about a third stringer on Buford that didn't really play much. But, again, that just goes to show that, scouting is top notch. And if you, can find guys that, you can develop. And so far, in very limited showings, Hall has made some impressive plays. And now with, a bigger role this year, you might be able to see much more out of Hall. But yeah, just from a look standpoint, I mean, Donovan Edwards looks huge. I mean, he is noticeably put on.
So yeah, you can see
muscle.
it.
Yeah, which is good for him because I think one of the major knocks on him is kind of going down at the first tackle. Being able to, that first contact being going down and being thick enough to kind of absorb that will change his game monumentally. I mean, that'll take his game to a whole new level if he's able to get through the first tackle and still maintain that speed and that shiftiness that he's been able to show. That's
an extra yard or two.
Yeah, that'll be a game changer for him. And that was probably that would have been the game changer for him this year outside of the obvious Penn State games and the Washington games. The extra yard or two or three on his runs, you probably would have had a lot different opinions on his year if he were able to get those. So obviously you want to see him, be this vision too is also another thing. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Blake. I think he's going to be in for a big year, and I think Kalel is not going to be too far behind him too. He told reporters this week. We were there on I think it was Monday or Wednesday, one of the two. He mentioned that he doesn't just want to be a short yardage back. He wants to show that he's capable of ripping off longer runs or being in situations where it's not necessarily third and short, second and short yardage situations. So, I'll be perfectly fine with that. If they have two guys that are capable of ripping off long runs and not specific short yardage backs, that's fine. That's great for Michigan. I mean, they'll still be great. So, yeah, I'm really intrigued with the running back group this year. I think that trio, if they can stay healthy, I think they'll be really productive this year and giving, Ben Hall a bigger role, I think will do really well for him. And obviously, if things, I mean, we're not even talking about, guys like Jordan Marshall or Micah Capana or not even on campus yet. Who could be in the mix too. I mean, I think Marshall probably would be more in the mix just because I think he's the most college ready guy out of the two right now, but we'll see if that happens. But yeah, I mean, they've got guys, they've got bodies, and we just have to see them and see how it plays out. But if Donovan is going to do Donovan things and continue an upward trajectory, I mean, he's going to command most of the snaps. So it's kind of up to those other guys to seize the situation when they have those, situational type of carries.
I continue to think, and we'll see how it plays out, but at some point in the season, whether it's earlier on as the season goes on, I think Mullings is going to be arguably the RB1. I really do. I think he's going to end up with more carries. It's not going to be a significant gap, but I think we're going to see both of those guys on the field at the same time a lot. Look, Donovan had plus 30 plus targets, 30 receptions last year, and we felt like they didn't use him in the passing game enough, right? That was mostly short yardage. They just didn't let him go deep. I think with maybe some of the help the wide receivers might need, Edwards is arguably already wide receiver 3 on this team, right? So I think you could see him used differently. He's going to get carries. But I think Mullings, when you talk about short yardage, what was so crucial to Michigan's success is staying on schedule. The 2nd and 5, the 3rd and 2, right? And Mullings, we've said this a bunch. He gets 5 yards a carry, not on average. He gets 5 yards a carry, right? So I think he can add, like he said, that extra element, but the Hassan Haskins comparisons are just too obvious.
Yeah.
And somebody else brought out, he had a reception against Penn State. I think Bama, he had one too, and he was dealing with a hand injury most of the year.
Yeah.
So a fully healthy Mullings could have more dynamics than we realize as well. But yeah, Ben Hall, Steve said this. I don't want to say running back coach is overrated. That's not it at all. I do think there's just something to natural ability when it comes to a running back, whether it's a speed thing or the ability to cut vision. Like there's definitely things to be coached. There's some stuff that running backs just do that you can't coach, and guys either have it or they don't.
Yep.
And that's why Jordan Marshall feels like the freshman that could contribute.
Yep.
There's just something to the way he runs. So.
Well, and I think Michigan learned their lesson too from, the year that they ran Blake like 35 carries a game. I think they need to, they realized that, I wouldn't say they messed up, because he earned every carry and should have won the Heisman that year too, if not for the knee injury. But I think they kind of learned their lesson that they need depth and need to be cognizant of the type of reps they're handing out. They don't want to overuse a guy if you've got another guy that can, give you as much or maybe more in certain situations. So I think that goes into it too. Building that depth that they can rely on, and giving a guy, not giving a guy 30, 35 carries a game. That adds up. It adds wear on the tires. And we eventually saw that with Blake towards the end of the year. It was an unfortunate hit, but but you're talking about him running 30 carries a game. It's just,
and we saw the best version of Blake Corum at the back half of the season.
Yep.
Especially they get the bye week and then the time off going into the playoff. And it just felt like he had a little bit more towards the end.
Yeah, it preserves guys. It makes them, you saw, as you said, you saw last year, healthy Blake, healthy Donovan, and you saw what they were able to do in certain situations. And that's huge. I don't want to say that Donovan was he just got bit by the injury bug a couple of times during the early part of his career, which is unfortunate. I think it held him back a bit, but with the way Michigan used their backs and were able to shuffle guys in and out, that preserved Donovan. And now you're able to see what a healthy and locked in Donovan Edwards looks like. And now you're obviously hoping to replicate that for a full year and not just in a window of time in 2 different ball games. Although huge moments in huge games, but you obviously want to see that extended out for an entire season.
All right, we are going to be here till the morning if we don't pick it up a little bit. So let's try and some of these are going to be obvious. Here's an obvious one, Colston Loveland.
Mm-hmm.
Look, we've talked about already. He might be wide receiver 1 technically by the end of this, just because he's the big target. Marlon Klein is somebody I think we could put in this spot as well if we're looking for a not so obvious answer. He's really locked into that tight end 2 role. Bredesen is arguably taking on a bigger role beyond fullback. Maybe he gets some carries. Maybe he gets some receptions. But Loveland is just blowing people away. He's taken another leap, it sounds like, going into the junior year. He's going to be the best tight end in college football. It's just there. But he's gone from this impressive athlete, which they've said they think Klein might be a better athlete, which is insane to think about.
Mm-hmm.
but there's just a different command Colston Loveland has in camp this year.
Yeah, no, he's been incredibly impressive. I think Michigan fans should enjoy him while you have him, because I do not expect him here much longer after this season. So we'll kind of see. I think the big thing for Michigan in their tight end room right now, obviously Loveland is going to do Loveland things. They're hoping Marlon Klein kind of steps up a little bit. They have guys like Max Bredesen and Josh Beetham that they really like. Josh Beetham is a walk-on that's really just put in the work, and has really kind of pushed his way up into kind of his specialized role, kind of like what Max Bredesen is right now, kind of like that blocker, just a tough kid that, is willing to put his helmet in wherever he needs to be. And yeah. And I think the big thing right now is the depth behind them. They want to see that develop. I know Zach Marshall's kind of been a little behind in terms of his development, has struggled in places. Tony Ellie, the same thing. Prescorn and Hogan Hansen. Both of those guys are just freshmen. They're just they're just adjusting to college ball. So it's going to take them a little time. I'm personally excited about Prescorn. They need a little more time and seasoning in order for them to be fully trusted. So ideally, I think the big thing with the tight end room right now is the back end. They want to see kind of step it up a little bit and develop. I don't think they're concerned by any means, but when you've got guys like Loveland there, he's going to command 95% of the snaps. So it'd be nice to have some guys to spell them out for a bit, but I think the big takeaway for me, obviously, is that Colston Loveland is Colston Loveland, but they're hoping that, some back end guys can kind of take a step forward here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and Steve asked about that specifically. Deacon Tonelli is a guy that could find a spot kind of backing up Marlon Klein in that inline blocking role. Look, if the opportunity is there, we saw Colston Loveland as a freshman start to play at the end of the year, and then by Ohio State and Purdue Big Ten championship game, he's like one of the top targets out there. Mm-hmm. Some of that had to deal with injuries and him being thrown into that spot. So you hope that's not the reason. I'm excited about both Prescorn and Hansen because I feel like everybody's picked one. Whoever you ask, there's a guy that really likes Brady and there's a guy that really likes Hogan. That's not saying one bad thing about the other, but it's just interesting how each of them have kind of earned their favorites throughout. But the one thing they have going for them is all of them are going to get to play and learn from Colston Loveland.
Yeah.
So I just continue to be impressed by the dude. And I think when I talked to Jake Budd about him and he said he was already better than him physically as a sophomore, that just really, since then, man, I've just been all in. I think the dude's going to have a legendary Michigan season. So I probably could have put a bunch of offensive linemen here, but again, we would have spent the whole show talking about offensive linemen that have made some noise this offseason. The one I really want to draw attention to is a guy I think could be a captain heading into the season this year, and that's Greg Crippen. A lot of people know his story. He thought he was competing for a starting job 2 years ago. They bring in Olu. He stays at Michigan, learns from Olu, ready to go every week, learning from him. Coming to last year, probably feels like he's going to be the starter. They bring in Drake Nugent, who was injured through a lot of spring and even into summer. And Greg Crippen played like the starting center. And a lot of folks will tell you it went to like the last week or two of fall camp where they would have been comfortable putting Crippen out there over Nugent, right? And Olu and Nugent are two guys that were if not the best center, definitely up there as the best centers in college football each year they played. So Crippen has stayed. He's waited his turn. Again, back to just talking about the thing with Orgy and the way they carry themselves and seeing how present they are with some of the other big name players. Greg Crippen is ready to take advantage of this opportunity. He is, cliche or not, everybody keeps saying it, so I'm going to say it. He's one of those first guy in the room, last guy to leave situations. He's always watching film. You keep hearing the same things about him. I think with all new starters on the offensive line, having a guy like Crippen, who is the culture piece that you want. He stayed, he's waited his turn. He's learned from two of the best centers in the last few years. He's got that high football IQ. He just seems really ready to run with this opportunity and be a very, very valuable piece to this offense.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to throw out more cliches, he's kind of the quintessential those who stay kind of guys, right?
He is. Yeah.
Like, I know it's kind of corny or whatever, but I mean, it's true. He stayed, he's a champion, he's a national champion, and now he has a chance to carry on the tradition and you know, and looks like he could slot in seamlessly and just and do his job. And I think that's just kind of what Michigan has always wanted with their offensive lines, is just guys that, you know, are just about the team, about developing and getting in there, doing their jobs and getting out of there and going to the league. You know, that's kind of what, you know, it's happened with Olu. It's probably going to happen with Nugent. And, you know, Crippen certainly he's got the looks of a guy that could be an NFL pro at some point. And, you know, they certainly talk about him like he has that ability. So, yeah, I mean, if I were to point out one guy on the offensive line outside of like a Josh Breeb, I think he's probably the one consistent name that's been mentioned all spring. So, I mean, good for him for riding this out, and now he's got his moment. I think you can pretty much etch his name in stone as the starting center. And again, I mean, you know, that's just the kind of culture that Michigan's built. You know, a guy that very easily could have transferred even long before, you know, Olu and him competing for the same starting. I mean, there's just a lot there that I wouldn't have blamed him if he left. But here we are, you know, a guy that, you know, is going to be your starting center barring something unforeseen. And I think he's earned the praise, and you know, he's put in the work. More importantly, he's put in the work. I mean, yeah, as you said, Grant Newsom was mentioned that they've had to kick him out of the building a couple of times because he's been there for so long watching tape and just always trying to learn and soak up whatever he can. So that's a sign of an encouraging player, someone that, I mean, that reminds me a lot of how people talked about Rod Moore when he first started, a guy that, you know, was just so into film and studied and learned. Hey, don't count him out. Don't count him out just yet. Don't count him out. But yeah, he reminds me a lot of like a Rob Moore type, a guy that really soaks in the film and translates that knowledge to the field. So I've got a really good feeling about Greg Crippen this year, and I think he's going to do good things for sure.
Yeah, I become biased to people, and I'm building a bias to Greg Crippen. I just the things you've heard about him, the fact he's stuck, and I mean, honestly, that whole offensive line room for the last few years, props to Sherrone Moore, props to Grant Newsom. Yeah. They brought, I mean, nobody's really left. A couple dudes have, but that was more depth chart than anything. That wasn't frustrated prospect or guy didn't start right away. I mean, even now in the position battle, we've talked about, you know, guys like Jeffrey Percy, Tristan Bounds, who have, I mean, Percy got a start. Bounds hasn't played much. Those are two monster tackles that could have been starting for the last couple of years in a lot of places.
Yep.
You know, and these guys are just, they're obsessed with the Michigan experience. And they've told me, look, if I start 1 year, my 5th year, I'm going to the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, it's right there. You know, the blueprint is there. Just follow the blueprint and they're going to get you there. I mean, that's not even hyperbole, or I'm not even BSing it. It's literally,
they're going to have 6 offensive linemen this year.
Yeah.
You know, 1 or 2 might be undrafted free agents. We'll have to see how it shakes out. But the fact that there's never been anything like that. 6 offensive linemen in a draft class, all invited to combine and things like that. So, Steve, they brought up Blake Frazier, which is interesting. Yes and no. I mean, this freshman class is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It's going to be so good. Him and Jake are the only 2 that are early enrollees, I believe, off the top of my head. So, look, Garnera could be a starter next year, depending on how things shake out with Crippen, or if Anderson stays, or how that works out. He's your center. Frazier, it's interesting to me they brought him up at tackle, because I've always kind of thought I've copied him to Zach Zinter a lot. He just reminds me of a very athletic guard potentially moving in. Some of that's because he's so lean right now. We'll have to see how his frame fills out, because his frame could fill out and he could be a Ryan Hayes too. Hayes was a smaller guy because he was a former tight end. So we'll see. But yeah, get used to the height from that freshman class.
Yeah.
They're all good, man.
Yeah. Once fall rolls around, I would not be surprised if you start hearing Sprague's name mentioned too. I mean, those
Sprague's
two guys,
probably the best of the group, and Frazier's right there with him. Yeah.
Sprague and Frazier are your future right there. So yeah, it's not surprising that they're here. I
Roebuck,
mean, a lot of people.
Oh, it's a good group.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about Frazier being really exciting. They also talk about how good of a kid he is too. So that's also a good thing. You like hearing that they're not pieces of crap.
We do hear that about some of them.
That sometimes happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
There's been an omission already in this show, but that's fine. Hey, your dad's a former national champion at Michigan. You show up and gladly take that 77 jersey. You know what that means.
Yeah, you could show up entitled, but you don't, and that's a good thing. That's a very good mindset.
All right, let's move to defense, and like I said, we'll try and go a little quicker here because we actually have a lot of basketball stuff to talk about too. But I'm gonna blow your guys' mind. Hype train defense. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. Can you believe it?
Wow.
Look, some of these guys are obvious, and it's probably dumb to even put them on here. But when it feels like it's even above what you expected, right? Mason and Kenneth, who everybody was freaking out, transfer portal, blah, blah, blah. They both have made their comments on that and why they stayed and the brotherhood and blah, blah, blah. Not going to get into that. They're just absolute beasts. They're absolute beasts. And Wink will tell you, a guy who's been in the NFL for a long time, those are NFL defensive linemen that he's got starting at defensive tackle.
Yep.
I'm guessing it's Pro Football Focus, but I don't even remember who put it out. It might have been them using a graphic from an analyst. I should look it up to be accurate. But either way, I saw something that said Mason Graham would be the first defensive tackle chosen in this draft. In 2024, if he was in it, and Grant was like 6th or 7th. So we talk about all the time having a player that's NFL caliber, NFL ready, or like literally already NFL talent. Michigan had a lot of that last year with guys like Keegan and Zinter coming back. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are already dudes that could be in the NFL, and they're here as juniors. They're probably not going to be here as seniors, so enjoy the year you have with them. But throughout camp, they're just blowing people away. You've got a new staff coming in too, so these are guys that have kind of watched them from afar. Brian Jean-Marie has made some comments on him. Obviously, we're going to hear more from Esposito now that he's been added to the staff. Wink, like I mentioned, I didn't want to separate them. These two guys are just blowing people away with, look, they won a national championship and they're coming in, they're hungry for more, and they're looking the part early in camp.
Yeah, and I'm going to take it one step further, and I'm going to just double up and include Etta into that conversation too, because they're all,
that'll help us with time. Let's do that.
Yeah, they're all. I mean, that's just how good that defensive line is that we can kind of just take a step back and telling you how good Graham and Grant are, because but guys like Etta are stepping up. Cam Brandt has been shouted out multiple times. Obviously you got Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore in there as well. So, again, I just don't see any kind of drop off from the defensive line when you talk about your front line core starters. Obviously they have to build depth, and, Etta is definitely someone that's gotten some pretty big hype during spring that they're hoping comes along. If you can get that core group of guys, Brandt, Etta, and TJ Guy involved and can get production out of that group, you'll be fine. I mean, then you got Trey Pierce at the at the tackles position. There's pieces there, and
healthy Rayshon Benny.
Yeah, and Benny, yes, and Benny should be back by fall. I mean, I obviously his injury was enough to get him out in the spring, but yeah. I mean, he'll be back by the fall too, and it'll take some time for him to kind of get back into the swing of things. I mean, it's not going to be just a plug and play type of situation. I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time. So that's kind of, I don't want to say good, because obviously you want him at 100%, but it's good for other guys like a Trey Pierce to come in and get a little bit more time that he may not have if Benny was full go.
Yeah.
So I think it'll work out in the long run. And yeah, I often forget to mention Benny just because he's injured, and it's just there's going to be lag time to get him back into the fold. But I mean, I would be very surprised if he wasn't at least very, very close to full go when fall camp starts, in August or whenever it is. So that's a good thing. And I want to take it one step further here and talk about Esposito's hire too. I think that it's been really good so far. I mean, we're talking about maybe 3 or 4 practice, probably 4. Today's probably like the 4th practice they've had with him. But from what I've heard and taken away is that he's really impressive. He's shown a lot of fire, a lot of enthusiasm.
So you've heard about his energy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of, that's what you need. This is a position where you bust people's asses. So you want a guy that kind of riles you up and gets you into that mode. And I think, Esposito not only is a good developer of talent, I mean, it's proof is right there. I mean, you don't have to look very far. Can recognize talent as well. So I think that's another great underrated addition that I, really wasn't expecting when, Scruggs left the program. So, yeah, I just think Michigan is a really strong defensive staff, and I have no issues about the development of, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I think this will be a really good coaching job by Esposito if he can get the most out of guys like Etta, Brandt, TJ Guy, Benny. There's so many names you could list off there that could see some time. So yeah, all good things on the defensive line so far. I mean both lines you could say that, I mean you're going up against the best, in both directions. So in 2 very good offensive lines are going, or the 2 very good lines are going up against each other in the offense and defense. So how could you not improve? Is kind of my point there. But yeah, I mean, it should be a shock to everyone. Not really. The defensive line is good, and it's going to be good this year. And I'd even go as far as saying it's going to be elite this year.
I think it's the best in college football.
No, yeah, I think so too.
When you talk about Graham and Grant on the inside, who are gap fillers, run stuffers, I don't remember Grant's exact number, but I know Mason, his point of contact on tackles was less than a yard last year. That's crazy. It's absurd.
Brick wall.
And you're talking about guys that can pass rush too. Grant had the only sack on Michael Penix in the national championship game. I think Mason had 4 or 5 sacks. I don't remember off the top of my head, but those are guys that can make sacks for you. Derek Moore and Stewart, this is similar to everybody kind of has a guy. Those are both double-digit sack potential guys, in my opinion, that I just absolutely think can take a huge leap. And then, I mean, Esposito is also a backup D coordinator on the staff. That's what's so impressive about this staff.
Yeah, there's multiple guys.
Lamar Morgan was literally just a defensive coordinator. Jean-Marie has called plays, was like in a co-DC type role, could be on that arch, right? It's crazy. It really is. And then, shout out in between the Scruggs dismissal and then the hire here. The analysts don't get enough credit, but LaTroy Lewis helping out on the interior and Wilkins helping out the edge outside linebacker role. Those are going to be huge factors in the coaching as well. And then Etta, yeah.
Pernell McPhee into that group too.
Yeah, I mean, that's just wild, dude. Yeah. But yeah, Etta was the next name he put on there. I think he is. I mean, I think it was a month ago. I put get on the hype train for him now because of the things I was hearing about him. He's an interesting piece because we wondered if he'd move inside or play out, and he's doing both, and that just screams do Chris Jenkins things at times and do Mike Morris things at times. Mm-hmm. Right. That's going to be his role. He's a guy that can be a part of the strong side rotation with Derek Moore. He's a guy that can slide in and stand up and play 5 tech. He can get 3 tech. We know Wink loves putting 7 dudes on the line, and you don't know who's rushing, who's dropping back. And you've got edge guys lining up in the middle and all over the place. So somebody like Etta with his size and speed and athletic ability that can line up all over the place, I think he's going to be an absolute stud. And he's been brought up multiple times by current players as well as players that have left as a dude they think that can make a big step this year. I'd argue the conductor of the Michigan football hype train, the leader, whatever you want to call it, is Jayshon Barham at this point. I don't know if a dude has been hyped up more than the Maryland transfer has.
Yeah.
Look, we know he can play ball. He's played 2 years as a starter at Maryland, and he was really good. But how many times in the last couple of years in the Michigan transfer portal have we seen somebody just by plugging them into a really good defense, now surrounded with other elite players, they're just able to take another leap, right? Barham is one of those dudes that is just physically impressive. You just look at him and it's like, well, the dude looks like a football player, right?
Yeah.
His speed is showing on the field. His physicality is showing on the field. And this is not the same thing because I think he's going to be even better. But all the talk of Josh Wallace last year when he got added late, it was like, yeah, he was really good at UMass and blah, 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 blah. What happens when you take a guy like that and put him on a team where now he has Will Johnson and Mike Sainer still and these other guys with him, it rises the tide, right? So Barham, no shot at Maryland, okay? But now that he's going to be playing behind Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart, all these guys we just mentioned with Ernest Hausman next to him and Will Johnson as a corner, he gets to be better, right? He's free to do what makes him great. And I can't talk to anybody without Jayshon Barham's name coming up, whether I ask or they bring it up on their own.
Oh yeah. From day one, Jayshon Barham's name has been brought up. And someone told me this weekend that he could play for the Lions right now. And again, I'm not buying into that. I mean, that's just pure
maybe the old Lions, but
yeah, I mean, that's just pure Kool-Aid chugging. I mean, I'm not gonna buy into that. But I mean, that's pretty impressive praise for a guy. Ultimately, we'll see how that translates to the field. But you're talking about a group of Ernest Hausman and Jayshon Barham there. I mean, that's two pretty good linebacker core right there. And I was also told that, you probably won't see much drop off between Barham and Colson, Junior Colson. So, which maybe I'm not even going to get into that too, because
I was going to say, when I asked that question and the answer involved Devin Bush, I was like, okay, don't do this to me.
Yeah.
Because I will eat the hype. I'm not like you, Josh. I love the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
But this is what they're talking about. Look, Colson played with clubs, dude. I don't think people talk enough about how good Junior Colson was. Leading tackler. I think the first year as a freshman, he was like fourth, but he's been the leading tackler the last 2 years, obviously. Dude never came off the field.
Yeah.
He could get out of position at times. Definitely improved the last 2 years, especially in coverage. But I think there's going to be things Barham's better at.
I agree. With that.
There's going to be things that maybe it's tough to replace with Colson, but people have brought it up. I think as a pass rusher, Barham probably brings an extra element, which that's more about replacing Michael Barrett.
Right. And the thing is too, is that there's actually film on Barham. This isn't just like some random dude in camp that's showing off. I mean, there's like a record there. I mean, Maryland has done a good job at scouting and bringing in talent, but they've just had losses. Like their top tier talent has gone elsewhere. That's just the type of thing. They're almost like a feeder program for their best players to go elsewhere. I forgot the stat, when Barham entered the portal, but I think like the last 3 years, their number one rated player on the team is gone, transferred away from that program.
People forget Chop Robinson started.
Yes, that was the one. That was included. It was included in that stat. Yeah, Chop Robinson left Maryland, and now Barham left. And Michigan's fortunate enough to get him, and I think that's not many people are talking enough about what Barham could be in this defensive system. So
and He's from St. Francis. So for those
Yeah.
of you who don't know, that was Biff's school. So that is Blake Corum's former school. Also makes Barham that is a junior, a former teammate of other Michigan junior, Derek Moore.
Yep.
So
Yep. So yeah, again, there's actually something credible that we can see that kind of backs up the talk, which is nice. So it's not just people blowing smoke up our asses to hype up a guy. I mean, there's actually like legitimate stuff out there. So yeah, he's a guy that a lot of people should
I'm
be
so
excited
excited.
about seeing
Yeah,
play. Yeah.
so excited. I'm going to answer this or bring it up. It's not something I have in our hype train, but who plays nickel? I think it's fair to say, Jaden McBurrow's backed
Yeah.
up last year a lot. He's been getting a lot of the reps there. Some good things have been said about him. Cody Jones has kind of been in that rotation.
Yep.
I think a name we've been hearing a lot that we're going to hear in a different context once Quentin Johnson does join the team. He's going to be a late enroll because of how late he ended up coming back to the program. So he hasn't been there.
Yep.
I think Zeke Berry is probably going to be named as a guy in that safety nickel hybrid, but those are probably the three names: McBurrows, Cody Jones getting some reps, Zeke Berry, excuse me. And then, maybe I could tie this into the next piece, which the other corner spot, we have another CB2 battle this year. DJ Waller was a guy as a freshman who kind of rose and contributed a lot more than people expected. Jair Hill had an early fast start and then ended up redshirting and playing back. Those two guys are competing a ton. I've heard either one of those could find a role. I think they're going to rotate that slot spot a lot is kind of what I'm getting at. But yeah, DJ Waller, to me, and maybe this isn't, I don't know if this is a fair way to put this, but when they moved Marion Walker over to defense and thought about what a guy with that kind of height but flexibility alongside Will Johnson would be like, DJ Waller is basically what they hoped Walker would grow into.
Yeah.
He's big, man.
Yeah.
And that's old school hardball corner, the Richard Shermans, the tall, physical outside corner.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it'll be very difficult for the coaches to keep DJ Waller off the field. I think he's going to be the guy at CB2. And I think he's going to play very well at that spot. And the good thing again about this position is that they have other guys that they can trot out there for depth purposes. But
I didn't realize Keyshawn Harris was back.
Yeah, and he's played a little bit as well. So
just good, reliable dude.
Yeah, I just think you can either it's gonna. I would be very surprised if Jaden McBurrows is not your starting nickel. And then you do a combination of him and Hill probably at a nickel, and then maybe a Hill and Waller at the other CB2 spot. But I mean, a combination of Will Johnson, McBurrows, and Waller are three pretty good guys, two up and coming guys that can have the potential to play at a high level. And then, you've got one of the best corners in college football in Will Johnson, who
can line up a nickel too.
Yeah. Who basically takes half the field away, half the side of the field away. So,
true.
I mean, that's kind of the bad, the good and the bad. I mean, the good is that you don't really have to worry about a guy, like Johnson giving up a big play, but it also kind of gives guys like Waller, McBurrows another opportunity to see passes thrown their way, because they'll probably pick on those guys because they don't want to throw it at Johnson. So you got to take the good and the bad, and that's a quick way to get development too, is when you have a really good corner on the other side who doesn't get much action because he's that good. So there's a lot to be excited about the defensive back group. I mean, you're missing. No one's going to be able to replace Mikey Sainer still. I mean, it's just impossible. But you've got guys who can play at a high level, and I think that's what you need. You don't need a Mikey Sainer still every year. He's one of one. You cannot replicate him. Just like you can't replicate a Will Johnson. You won't be able to replicate him, but you can get someone that can be good, that plays good football. So again, a lot to like there. DJ Waller is definitely leading the hype train in the defensive back group for sure. And that's not just from what people we speak to. I mean, a lot of defensive guys have mentioned him publicly too. So there's definitely, something to that talk.
That is a physical secondary. I mean, when you talk, Will's a guy that can lay hits. Waller, McBurrows is a linebacker trapped in a corner's body. I mean, he's been hurt twice because of him leveling hits, and we don't even get into the safeties. Makari Page is a big dude.
Yep.
I think Brandon Hillman gets a huge opportunity to have a Keon Sabb like sophomore year. Zeke Berry's a physical dude. We saw Quentin Johnson lay out Igbuka, so it's a good group, and I'm not shocked to see Waller getting that attention early. And I'm with you. I think him and Hill are both too good to not play. So I like the idea of maybe Hill getting some run at nickel. I think that's pretty good. So that's going to be it for football hype train. I do want to answer, just because it's fun, the JJ question really quick before we move into basketball. The JJ hype being that the fourth QB, maybe even that the third pick. Do we think it's a smoke screen? Do we think it's real? I do think he's the fourth QB. I've seen some talk with May and Daniels and rotating some of those guys. The amount of talk of the Vikings moving up was suspicious to me, because teams usually don't want that open and out there.
Mm-hmm.
That usually means, because there are some questions about a Daniels or a May, I do think there is some effort to try and get teams to trade up to get McCarthy, either because they want a QB to fall or because Marvin Harrison Jr. could be available at the fifth pick.
Right.
If 4 QBs go up there. I do think that's some of it. I think there's a lot of teams that could benefit from 4 QBs going in the front. So keeping this hype going is important. That said, I do think, I mean, somebody mentioned it, the New York Giants at 6 are legit. I could see the Vikings wanting to trade up for JJ, just because, not to get into the connection to Shanahan and McVay and all of that stuff, but I think he's somebody who could fit in that type of system. I think the Broncos, Sean Payton could look at him and maybe see some Drew Brees that could help him with his offense. I think he's a lock for the top 10. I don't know if he'll be the third QB or the fourth one taken, how much of that is smoke or not, but the debate around him has been bizarre, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of it's probably strategy too, putting fake, or not necessarily fake stuff, but putting stuff out there to kind of cause a team to react to that, whether to trade up or down or whatever. So, there's probably, there's probably some truth, some strategy, and then there's probably something in between too. But I definitely don't think this is some like Will Levis type of stuff.
That was the name I had in my head, and I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot
that
of people,
was out of nowhere and absurd.
Yeah, that there's not enough. I do not think this is like Will Levis situation where he drops the fourth round. If that happens, some team is going to pick up an absolute steal of the draft if that were to happen. But at this point, with just the amount of times that he's been mocked in the first like 10 picks, I would be shocked if he's gone. If he's still, let me rephrase. I'd be shocked if he's still there at like 10 or 11th.
Yeah.
I think someone will trade up to get him if they feel like he's a danger to go. He may not be QB1 to go. I mean, I think that's Caleb Williams' spot. But it gets interesting. The debate after that gets interesting, and McCarthy could very well be QB2 if someone likes him enough. And
I was just gonna say, it takes one team to fall in love with a guy.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So, we'll kind of see what happens. I think there's a lot of smoke screens out there, but I don't think the hype is a smoke screen.
Yeah.
I think the hype
is
legit.
People just finally watching him play.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
I mean, we've seen tweets that they're like, I hadn't really watched the film. Like, what?
Yeah. How can you not watch the film
It's
of the
crazy.
national champions?
Yeah. So
it's crazy.
We'll see. I just hope he goes. I think fit is the most important thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
And
Patrick
that's for
Mahomes
any
is not
sport.
Patrick Mahomes if the Bears would have taken him.
Yeah,
That's just a fact.
that's for any sport too. I mean, the difference between a Jordan Poole's career, excuse me, a Nick Stauskas career and a Duncan Robinson career is because of fit,
Yeah.
and a little bit because the game. I think Nick Stauskas was a little bit before his time too. But if Stauskas found a fit like the Heat, he'd be having an insane career like Duncan Robinson is right now. So, yeah, you're 100% correct. A lot of it is fit.
So you're talking about basketball? We're going to talk basketball.
Let's
But
do it.
like Josh said, at the Den, Intel, spring practice stuff, keep up with us throughout the week. We're having these conversations all the time at michigan.rivals.com. We're getting close to, I think we're going to start hearing a little bit more stability and maybe some depth chart stuff. I'm going to be interested with the spring game this year because, I mean, there's just not the level of depth that there was last year.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I wouldn't be shocked if the defense dominates that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't really know, and that's the thing. I don't really know what the format is this year
I
either.
think they're going to still do the draft thing.
The
But
draft makes sense. But
we'll see. All right, basketball. So we're going to go through the list here. We'll talk about the staff kind of coming in, and then some roster moves, everything from keeping current guys together, some transfer portal stuff, some recruiting that's still existing with the 24 class as well.
yeah,
But it looks like Dusty May's staff is coming together. And I'll be honest, when he was first hired, there was a lot of talk of, I don't know how I want to put this, but maybe some beeline guys being involved, whether that was Washington staying or, we had heard about Haynes over at Marquette, whether he would be targeted or even an old Laval Jordan, something like that. And very much like the questions around Sherrone Moore and how he builds his staff, we've seen Dusty May kind of swing for the fences here. The first one, what was Mike Boynton, the former Oklahoma State head coach, who is immediately, as soon as he was hired, people that know a lot more than me were like, okay, this is a huge hire. Obviously for us here in Michigan, we think of Cade Cunningham and his recruitment to Oklahoma State, but getting a guy head coach experience established like that, big hire. And then look, he's got his own connections with dudes that he's worked with coming up through Florida with Mike White, who's now at Georgia, and ding, ding, here you go, Planets Line, Akeem Miskadeen.
Yep.
Georgia assistant coach, really well thought of, up and coming young coach who was a big part of what was built at FAU, and we'll get to that in a moment. And then we'll talk about who that last possible hire that's really picked up some steam too. But those first two that we know, what were your thoughts? Because mine was kind of like, okay, dude's not messing around.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I kind of had that feeling before all of this started happening, not because of the names, just because of what he was doing. I'm talking about Dusty May, just him, putting in the work of reaching out, to collectives, to big boosters and things like that for NIL purposes. So I kind of knew going into this thing that May was gonna not mess around with this thing, but yeah, I mean, targeting a guy like Mike Boynton, I mean, that's a big hire, a guy that's really well connected in the New York and New Jersey area. Obviously, none of these names are official yet, but I mean, it's certainly trending towards Boynton joining the staff as well as Akeem Miskadeen as well. But yeah, I mean, getting a guy, a former head coach with experience of being in the NCAA tournament, a guy that brought a number 1 overall draft pick in Cade Cunningham and a number of other talented players at Oklahoma State as well. It just didn't quite work out after 7 seasons. But yeah, I mean, getting a guy like that, a strong recruiter, a good coach and a good guy, getting him on your staff as kind of like your lead assistant with experience I think that's a really good 1-2 punch for Dusty May and Boynton together. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's going to be a long-term thing. I think Boynton will get a head coaching job again sooner rather than later. But yeah, I mean, you won't see me complain about any of these names. I mean, Boynton, I think, is a big, big splash. A really good job of recruiting and hiring him. And then, Yeah, I just think it's going to be really a really strong recruiting staff in general. A lot of all three of those guys have recruiting chops. So, and I think that's going to be a big part of May's program. I mean, right now, he kind of has to prioritize the portal just because they don't have anyone. I mean, they don't have any bodies, so they got to have experience in there. But eventually, once things kind of level out a little bit, you kind of have to prioritize recruiting too. So, I think this staff is definitely going to be a plus recruiting staff. But yeah, as far as Mike Boynton goes, I mean, that's a really good hire. And yeah, I can't really say much, any bad things about it. A strong developer, strong recruiter who has a lot of ties all over the country. So there's nothing wrong with bringing in experience. And, they did just that with Boynton.
And a name that you posted about yesterday or 2 days ago, I don't remember, really starting to pick up a lot of steam. I don't want to put words in your mouth because I don't remember which words you used to describe his potential hire, but Rod Clark from Tennessee. You just talked about recruiting. This is a guy who came up through the AAU circles,
Yep.
the Nike EYBL tour. He specifically at Tennessee, I don't want to get this wrong. Here we go. Kenny Chandler was a guy that Michigan obviously recruited. Juwan had a really good relationship with. If you remember, after Michigan beat Tennessee in the tournament, he was seen hugging, consoling Chandler and Julian Phillips, two guys that Clark specifically recruited. Rick Barnes just went out for this dude in 21 and did whatever he could to get him on staff. He's also known as a really, really good developer of talent, going back to the AAU and some of the high school stuff. This is a name I never would have even considered.
Yep.
Right. But he's kind of thought of as the recruiting guy at Tennessee, the closer, if you will. This is a big hire if they're able to close. If Dusty May is able to close the door on that. You posted some intel. Where are we sitting with this potential?
Yeah. So
courting, if you will.
Yeah, Clark's name came up today, and I was told it's all but certain that he's headed to Michigan. So it's on the 5-yard line about to hit the end zone. I think, and also Akeem Miskadeen too. And I didn't talk about him, and I should talk about him here in a second. Miskadeen. I kind of used that segment all on Boynton, but Clark, yeah, you're a young, very much similar, in a similar vein to Miskadeen as well.
Was he 32?
Yeah, he's early 30s. Miskadeen is right around that age too. A guy that's worked his way up. And I know Miskadeen was on a couple of lists of 30 under 30 or whatever, those kind of lists. But yeah, another strong recruiter. Barnes likes him a lot, and yeah, it looks like, and May has been kind of going after him for a week to 10 days or so, has really been pushing hard for him. And I was told by someone in the Tennessee circles that it looks like it's going to get done. And again, it's not done, but it looks like it's heading in that direction. So they're kind of preparing for that departure. So yeah, I mean, Tennessee Rod Clark was responsible for bringing Dalton Knecht to Tennessee, and we all saw what Knecht did for the Volunteers this year. I mean, they were a tournament team that made a little bit of a run. So he can identify talent, he can recruit talent. So yeah, but I think, and I do want to give time to Miskadeen. Very close, a good relationship with Connie Ruths, which we'll talk about here in a second, which is important for Michigan. And obviously not the only reason why he was brought to Michigan was because of Ruths. That's obviously not it, but has recruiting chops. Another up-and-comer guy that is a talented, was a good player, is a good coach, and has worked his way up the ranks. And obviously May has familiarity with him as he was on his staff. So, that move just makes a ton of sense for so many reasons. But we'll talk about Connie Ruths here in a second. But yeah, I mean, three young guys. I mean, Boynton is still relatively young too. He's the older of the group, but he's still a young coach. 3 young guys that are energetic, that can go out and recruit. And I think that's something not to crap on the old staff, but the energetic recruiting part is kind of important, and you kind of need that. And Sadi and those guys, they did their jobs, but
Jawan was the recruiter.
Right. Those guys grind.
so-
Those guys can grind, and Dusty's showing right now that he can bust his ass, and that's huge. I mean, he's really impressed me with what he's done so far. He just needs to get a couple of commits across the line here to open the floodgates, and I know we're going to talk about that here in a second.
No, I'm really impressed. It makes me think of the change that happened with the football staff.
Yeah,
the young, energetic, and look, it's going to be different, right? Jawan needed somebody like Phil Martelli.
Yep.
As a first-time head coach. He needed somebody like that on the staff. Dusty's already said, look, I'm going to spend 30% of my time on NIL.
Yeah.
Like you said, we know he's been meeting with the collectives. We know he's been talking to some big boosters and things. And I think he's trying to be one focus lane as a head coach. And then he's gone out and got guys that are either head coach experience, head coach caliber, like are going to be the head coach of their role and are just monster recruiters. And you can see the formula and it's impressive. And yeah, like Steve said, going outside of his staff, obviously Miskadeen is somebody he worked with under Mike White, and then he was on his staff at FAU, but also cool too. Him and May and White are, I believe they've said they're basically best friends, but they're very, very close, and him being able to go take Miskadeen from his Georgia staff we'll see how close they still are, but I'm sure that was probably understood between both sides. But
yeah, I mean, it's easy for a guy to lean back on what and take this.
Everyone does that.
And yeah, I mean, Harbaugh did it. I mean, but you can also say the same thing for Sherrone on the football side too. It's like, I mean, yeah, his Rolodex isn't as large as Harbaugh's, but he did go outside of the traditional circle, so to speak. I mean, he did get some guys that he's familiar with at Louisville, but I wouldn't say that, he's just retreading guys by any means. I mean, all of his hires are quality hires, outside of the box hires, guys that we didn't really talk about. So, I mean, getting guys from successful programs, and Georgia's, they're kind of middling a little bit, but they have pieces. Getting talented guys from good teams, you can't poo-poo that idea. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think it's really good, and not for him to not, to lean on past experiences a little bit. I mean, but Miskadeen has had some development beyond FAU too, so you can also consider that an outside of the box hire too. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's good, and he's not messing around. He's going out and trying to get the best he thinks he can get, and by all accounts, I mean, he's doing pretty well with these three hires if they can get over the finish line, of course.
And let's be honest, we all think very highly of the Michigan basketball program, okay? But where it is right now isn't the most attractive job, man, if we're just being honest, right? So to get these hires, I'm impressed. So, and then, Steve said getting a piece of that Tennessee defense would be nice too. Yeah, defense improving would be nice after last year. My God. All right, let's get into some roster stuff. So current roster ins and outs. Will Cheddar, using the great Ricky Bobby, did confirm he will be coming back. He didn't enter the transfer portal, but there was just some uncertainty about him coming back. So Cheddar is back. Doug McDaniel transfers to Kansas State. Not a huge shock there. Jerome Tang pulled out of the Arkansas search, I believe, but that was out there for a little bit. So that could have got interesting. We said after the whole academic thing, I did not see a path back for Doug.
No way.
That continues to be the case. We weren't sure about Terrence Williams, what he would do. He put out an announcement that he was declaring for the NBA draft, and then also entered the transfer portal. The way the NBA works, that's not a bad move at all, because he can go through the process, maybe get the G League camp invite. That's really common. Still, I guess we'll see, but that feels like a return to college and maybe not Michigan. But nothing new with Terrace Reed. We'll get into this in a second with some of the guys they're targeting. Again, I continue to feel like they're going to go a different direction there, so it doesn't seem like he's going to have a path back. But Cheddar coming back, I think that's a huge piece. I think when the team was in really, really low moments last year, he consistently showed effort. I'll just say he looked like he gave a damn, right?
Right.
I think getting him back at worst in a similar role, 10 to 15 minutes off the bench, a good spark guy. I think I don't have an issue with that at all. He's a guy that really seems to love Michigan and did not have fun this last year,
Yeah.
like anybody, but he showed effort at all times on the floor. So.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really have much thoughts on the current roster as a whole right now. I mean, yeah, you're
There's
gonna
two
get
guys. Well,
yeah, right. You're gonna get Cheddar returning, Jace Howard maybe returning, but yeah,
God, that would be funny.
getting Cheddar back is a good move, and I think it's a big win for Dusty May. I mean, you got a guy that probably considering who Michigan is in on in terms of transfers, you're probably looking at like a 6th or 7th man type of guy. But I think that's the perfect role for him. I mean, a guy that can give you energy off the bench, and give you a spark off the bench, and a bench that's going to be much deeper than it was the last couple of years. So I think that's important. So getting him back is a really good thing. And if they can pair him with some guys on the team, you're looking like getting a much better Michigan program rather quickly. So, we'll see how things go. And we'll talk about here in this next segment. But yeah, getting Cheddar back is a big win.
And a hell of a slash line, man. 58% from the field, 52% from three. Made 72% of his free throws. If I'm getting that off the bench, I'm okay with that. And again, I like the effort piece. So, all right.
Especially considering Michigan got next to nothing from bench production last year. I mean,
they didn't even have much of a bench. There wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
There wasn't enough players. Right.
Anything is better than nothing.
So one name that got mentioned, I would say immediately when Dusty May was hired, was Florida Atlantic's big man Vladislav Golden.
Yep.
People calling him the Russian Edie, which is kind of funny to me. I mean, Edie's the player of the year, so maybe that's not a fair comparison. But look, 7-foot dude, scores 15 points a game, gets you 7 boards, shoots close to 70% from the field because he's by the rim, right? Just a classic big man.
Yep.
He's in the portal. A lot of smoke the last couple of days that feels like he's probably, for potentially, I don't know what word you want to use, but trending very heavily to following his coach, Dusty May, in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, we'll kind of have to look into this a little more. I know there's probably going to be a visit in the mix here at some point rather soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does commit to Michigan, but still goes through that NBA process, because I know he declared for the NBA too.
Fair.
So I think at least reserving a spot on a roster is probably smart. I don't think he's an NBA guy, and I don't think he's going to, go to the NBA. I think he's.
I don't know what an NBA guy is when it comes to big men anymore.
Yeah, so. It's hard. It's hard. Yeah, a guy like that who, I don't want to say not athletic, because that's just a slight on these athletes, but there's a difference between a Donovan Clingan and a Vlad Golden. I mean, you can tell both good players, but one kind of transcends.
You get into the position list stuff.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of when you get into the nitty gritty stuff. But I mean, I think Vlad Golden to Michigan is a pretty safe bet right now. I haven't really heard of too many other threats, and I think he's a great fit for the system, especially if you pair him with the next guy in Danny Wolf, who is basically the polar opposite of Golden.
And I was going to say, some people think that's an either or. It's not. I think they absolutely
want to pair those two together. Originally kind of hypothesized that it might be an either or situation, but since we know that Wolf is being recruited as a 4, you can absolutely play 2 7-footers on the floor at the same time. And wow, what a foreign concept that is, playing 2 7-footers at the same time. But yeah, when you compare Golden's game to Wolf, 2 vastly different players. As you said, a guy that likes to park it under the rim and that you can kind of facilitate to, and Wolf is very much a guy that you can stretch the floor with, because he's about like a 35% 3-point shooter last year in his first year with Yale that had heavy minutes. So both guys that have potential to play 30 minutes too, which is really big. But I think right now the closest to probably I'd say to dropping to Michigan is probably Danny Wolf. I know Dusty May has had an in-home with Wolf. I do know that a visit is going to be planned here soon, and I think Michigan's going to push for him. But I think right now the favorite for Wolf and Golden is probably Michigan. I know Indiana is probably the next up for Wolf if it's not Michigan. I know they're pushing for him hard, but yeah, since we kind of know that both of those guys can play with one another at the same time, I think, yeah, I mean, I would say those are probably two pretty, and those are two additions. You don't have to worry about your front court after that because you got Cheddar in there too.
I was just going to say that. That rotation of those three.
You don't have to worry about your front
play
court.
Center. You can move them. Yeah, that's a solid.
Now you just kind of have to worry about the back end, and you know, a guy like Connie Ruths, who has been heavily rumored to come back to Michigan too, which we'll talk about here in a minute, can play your three, or someone else that you grab. But yeah, your front court with a Golden and Wolf, that's a pretty good front court considering what the Big Ten is losing in terms of talent after this year.
That's a good point.
It's a good step forward to competing right away. I think that's two very good additions that are realistic for Michigan right now. I think things are trending in the right direction for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, Wolf, man, I don't want to compare it to Hunter because he's not, but like he's going to take two or three 3-pointers a game. Right? Yeah, he's got that stretch for potential. So yeah, the two of them together, intriguing is definitely the word. The other Florida Atlantic player that came up almost immediately when Dusty May was hired was John L. Davis, the guard. This is another dude that just, I mean, obviously it makes a lot of sense because he just came from May's scheme, right? But shoots 48% from the field, 42% from three, 85% free throw, gets 7 rebounds as a guard. Not a big distributor per se. So, I mean, that's a little different than maybe what we're used to in recent years, that the point guard that's going to get you the 7 or 8 assists a game as a distributor. But I think that's just because we expect a lot of ball movement, a lot of guys at different times to be the one moving the ball around. But he's another potential, I don't want to say double-double guy, but he's a point scorer. He's a guy that can get rebounds and do that thing in the guard play. Where do you think things sit with him in Michigan as well?
For John L. Davis, I think this one's kind of an interesting one. I do think Michigan is probably the one college team that to look out for here. I know a program like Louisville is pushing hard too. But I think, I think if he's going the college route, it's going to be Michigan. I said on the boards earlier this week that I'm cautiously optimistic that Michigan's going to be the choice. But I heard as soon as today that the NBA could be a legitimate option if it's there. Which the big question we don't know right now is, does the NBA want him? You know, that's two very different scenarios. I mean, he may want the NBA, but he may not be considered a high draft pick yet. So it kind of just depends on what he's looking for. But I think if he ends up going the college route, I do think it's going to end up being Michigan, which is a huge deal for Michigan. That's a really nice pickup. But I do think the NBA is going to be a factor. I don't know how much of a factor, but I think there is going to be some consideration there, whether he goes or decides to go to college for another year. But I think when you're talking commitment or transfer destinations, I think Michigan is at the top of that list right now. I think a lot of people feel good about where that stands, but Michigan's going to have their fair share of Davis is going to have their fair share of suitors when it comes to other programs pushing for him too. So I don't think that one is as close as maybe guys like Golden and Wolf are, but Michigan is definitely in the mix for Davis. Absolutely. And I still think they're probably right now the team to beat. But again, things change so much, especially when it comes to the transfer portal, that, you know, this information could be stale in an hour, you know, as we've shown multiple times last couple of weeks with these podcasts. So,
go hit publish on the article as soon as we.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So we'll
He's
see what
got
happens.
he's got the obvious connection to Dusty
Right.
May, and then Akeem Miskadeen was also a very
Yes,
valuable
that's a
piece
good point.
brought on
Thank you
to
for bringing that
FAU as
up.
well.
Yes,
So
he is. Miskadeen was directly responsible for bringing John L. Davis to FAU. So
yeah.
two very big pulls for him personally. So we'll ultimately see what it comes down to once he kind of gets his MBA stuff back. So we'll see what happens.
I'm including him on the list, but we've talked about already that this is a time, no rush kind of situation with Connor Siege taking his time. But you just continue to hear him connected to Michigan, and then he's probably another Indiana threat as well, I would imagine. But
Yeah, I know he's planning a visit. I'll have more on him on the boards tomorrow. I can't really talk about much about him right now because I am sworn to secrecy. So I can't talk a whole lot about him right now. But yeah, I do know that he does not have an offer from May yet. I think, which is funny because I think May is doing a lot of the beeline type of things where he gets kids on campus and then offers, because that way you got a guy that wants to go to Michigan. Obviously, we're very aware that Esiason wants Michigan, but I do know there's a visit planned here in the next few days, and that'll be telling the direction of where this goes. But I do not expect him to sit on an offer if he gets it. I mean, I would be very surprised if he left campus without an offer. I feel like that'd be wasting both May and Esiason time. But it kind of feels like a matter of when, not if. So when the offer happens, we'll kind of see what that layover is between an offer and announcement. But I find Michigan very hard to beat if they offer Esiason on his visit. I mean, he has visits set up elsewhere too, and has his suitors, but I think Michigan is the team that he wants, and I think he'd be more than happy canceling his visits if he gets an offer. So yeah, that's another guy that cautiously optimistic with, and I think really at this point, I think it's safe to say the ball is in May's court, so to speak, with getting Esiason to Michigan.
Oh, the pun is just too good.
Yeah, unintended pun, but it's what it is right now. It's up to, I think it's truly up to May to decide what he wants to do with that scholarship.
All right, I screwed up. You guys all know I absolutely butcher last names. It's even worse when it's one like this. I've got to think about the way my letters get mixed together. But anyway, I screwed up and I forgot to look up the pronunciation before we came on. But I wanted to include another Ivy League guy, point guard at Penn, Clark Slatchert.
Yeah, that sounds good enough. Slatchert.
I'm sure it's one of those situations where like
Slatchert.
something's silenced there and it's just like slurt or something. But anyway, I apologize. I should have looked it up. But this just comes back into the wide net. We keep hearing this term with Dusty May. He's done it with the coaching and with the transfer portal. Yes, he's gonna try and take advantage of connections he has, because duh. But he's also looking everywhere for guys that are gonna fit. He's got a lot of seats to fill, and hopefully none of them are empty come season time. But Clark's a smaller point guard, a guy that shoots above 40% from three. He's interesting to me because his list of final 8 teams has a Utah State, a San Francisco, a Davidson, but it also has UCLA, Cal, Michigan, and USC. So just an interesting piece, but I wanted to include him because, again, it's just somebody else Dusty May is getting involved in that's mentioning Michigan. So I misspelled.
Yeah, Golden is DIN, not DEN.
Right. That was probably an autocorrect, if anything, to be honest. But yeah, fair enough. Yeah, all right. At least I could pronounce it.
Yeah, that's true. Got that going for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
You're right. You're right.
Start drop, but
it's just kind of it is. I mean, there's countless. We could have included a massive list of players that have been.
Yeah, I didn't want to get. I added him because he recently put Michigan in the top 8, and yeah, just
and I'll add another name into that list too. Kerry Booth from Notre Dame. I know I've been in a message from his dad. He said that they are planning a visit, but they don't have a date set. So there's no, I mean, I don't know how serious that, that recruiting process will be. Obviously you got to have a visit set to, for it to be really serious, but for Kerry Booth, Notre Dame transfer, probably planning on visiting Michigan, but does not have a day set up. So, that could probably can turn into not visiting or absolutely visiting. So we'll kind of see, where that goes.
So the portal is going to be a big piece. And then obviously I'm with you. I feel like once one or two fall in, we're going to see a floodgate kind of situation, but there's still work to do. There was work to do while Juwan was still here with the 2024 class.
Mm-hmm.
The one I did not include on here was Christian Anderson. That felt like kind of a mutual separate ways situation. So he decommitted. He's not going to be part of the class. Fat Brooks recommitted. He will be a part of the class. Ruth's was interesting because, like I said, work still to do. He hadn't signed his national letter of intent to begin with as a commit to Michigan. Decommits once Juwan's let go. May comes on. Optimism at this point is pretty high that he will end up at Michigan. Mm-hmm. The second school, or the school that seemed most likely with him back in the cycle, was Georgia. You already mentioned this. His lead recruiter at Georgia was Akeem Miskadeen. So not the only reason he was hired, but man, that sure helps.
No, it's not definitely not a bad thing.
Bruce was a good get for Juwan, and he's a guy you'd like to keep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's absolutely a guy you'd like to keep, and it was a good get by Juwan to get him in the first place. But I think the big thing with Ruth's is that he was likely going to commit to Georgia and Miskadeen in the first place. But I'm trying to get my details correct, but I think they took someone else instead of Ruth's, so that kind of played his hand into committing to Michigan. Well, now circle back. I mean, May's been going after him hard recently at a IMG practice in Indiana recently, watching him play. And I know there's interest in getting him back from May's perspective. And I know Ruth's is open to talking about Michigan too. So, and then the fact that you add a guy, an assistant coach that he probably had the best relationship with out of everyone outside of Juwan Howard, now at Michigan, I think that plays into Michigan's hands for Ruth's really well. I think right now I would say I think Michigan has the upper hand right now. And I'm not saying that with 100% certainty, but it certainly feels and looks that way right now. And again, I say right now because things change all the time in a second in this day and age. So again, this information could be stale tomorrow for all I know. But I think things are trending in the right direction with Connie Ruth's. And I would not be surprised that you'll see Ruth's back into the fold here sooner rather than later. So again, that's a really nice pickup, no matter how you spin it. Even if it was Juwan or Dusty May, I think it's a really nice pickup, and it's going to be a big addition. And you could realistically kind of see him as a day one starter if Michigan does not get the next guy we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to say, so back to the wide net, but also not that wide. This is a move. The more you look into it, it makes a lot of sense. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Liam McNeely at this point is now the best available player still in the 2024 class. He decommitted from Indiana after they confirmed that Mike Woodson would be back. So that's kind of an interesting, take that however you want. But yeah, look, this is a top 15 player in the country. Kansas, Kentucky, Houston, all the big dogs are in on him. But McNeely was a guy that had Michigan in his top 6 or 8 in the summer, right? I'm trying to remember. Was it Caleb Houston went to Montverde? Same.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. But look, this is the wing you want, man.
Yes.
This is the guy that just fits the modern college basketball game. 5-star recruit. I mean, I don't know what else to say. You're going up against the big guys again. Kansas and Kentucky, Bama might be in there. Duke, you could probably list them all, but he knows Michigan already. He already was in that consideration. Obviously, if Michigan was playing like when Juwan first got here, maybe it gets a different consideration, right? So he already knows the Big Ten Conference. You've got the connection with him being down in Florida. I don't know. I don't want to put any numbers or weight on it, but this is just another one where it's like May's not messing around, man. He's taking the shot, and by accounts, again, for people that know better than me, it's not a shot in the dark. This isn't a, you don't make shots you don't take. There's people that think he could pull this off.
Yeah, and I'm one of them for sure. I definitely think he can. I'm not going to say that he will. I think they have a great shot. I do think there is a legitimate shot. There was legitimate interest before, and I think there will be a legitimate interest moving forward. McNeely's going to have his choice of whatever program he wants to go to, but I definitely think Michigan is going to be in the mix here. I'm not by any means ready to make any proclamations that he will be a Wolverine, but May's going to go down swinging for sure. And McNeely has been very receptive to those advances by May. And I definitely think he's going to be in the mix. And if you can get Ruths and McNeely in the same class, that's huge. I mean, again, solves your wing problem. I mean, you could, it'll be tough to figure out who you'd rather start, Ruths or McNeely, because they're both extremely talented guys. I mean, probably McNeely is slightly more talented than Ruths, but still, I mean, that's a good problem to have. So, yeah, I would say, I feel very much like I do with John L. Davis, like cautious optimism. Like I'm optimistic that there is a path that can happen, but also realize that, anything can change in a heartbeat. And a guy like McNeely and also Davis, who will have his fair share of suitors, anything can happen at this point. But I do think there is legitimate interest. Yes.
He's just, when you're looking to reboot your program, getting like a guy like him day one that just can shoot from the three, can drive the hoop, can catch the ball, can come off dribble, can play defense. Just, again, top 15, 5-star, getting a dude like him out the gate would be massive. But it also kind of feels like, if they don't, I mean, obviously bummer, right? But this isn't, from a trajectory standpoint, like, oh no, right? It's just something I wouldn't have expected as a realistic option. Again, you were talking about with Juwan and whether you give him another year, what does that look like? And it's, hey, what can you do to turn this roster over? Because what are the expectations need to be? What would Juwan have had to do this year for you to say, okay, we're good, we're going in the right direction? How much of a jump would you have to make?
Yeah.
Fair or not to him, like just from a perspective standpoint, right? New coaches are always going to have advantages because they're new. There's new, you're selling new, and there's a freshness to it, right? So keeping somebody like Cheddar, right? Getting a couple transfers, dudes that locking up guys like Brooks. Maybe you get Ruths in your 24 class. I've got listed on here. I don't know much about them. I'm not going to get into it unless you do, but a couple guys committed to Florida Atlantic right now, Elijah Elliott, Ty Robinson. I think one of them entered or decommitted, right? But we're not sure.
I think both of them have entered or decommitted. I think I'm pretty sure both of them are decommitted. But
again, there's eight or nine seats right now.
Right.
So
those are probably, it's hard to say because I don't really know for sure, but those kind of seem like guys that you go back on, that you after you miss on some guys. So excuse me, got the hiccups all of a sudden. But to go off what you just said, I think if Dusty May lands about 75% of those names on that list, I think you're talking about a team that can compete for the Big Ten next year. I mean, you're going from an absolute bottom dweller team to competing really quick with some really talented guys.
Golden Wolf and McNeely alone as your front court, your wing, that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's game on at that point.
What?
It's game on at that point. Absolutely. I think, yeah, this is a really quick way to go from pretty bad to all right, pretty good in a couple of months. And obviously, you can't just live off the portal. You got to recruit too. But again, Ruth's, McNeely, there's future
Right.
there. I mean, they don't really seem like a 4-year guys by any means. They look like they could be legit NBA talents, but you get them in, a lot can happen at that point.
Well, and again, I don't want to do that thing where we set this bar of like, hey, this is potential, and now anything less that, blah,
You're right.
right? But it feels like to me, I like again alone just the confidence in it and being a factor, right? We talked about with Michigan football and Clinkscale specifically coming on to get into Ohio and start getting dudes that we didn't think we could get from Ohio, right?
Yep.
And being a contender for Bryce West and Aaron Scott to the point where it was like, look, you were a factor very late in this cycle, right?
Yep.
Where, I mean, the past those dudes wouldn't even come to Michigan because they would fear the repercussion they would get from even visiting. Right. You know what I mean? Like you're taking dudes out of Cleveland. I can't even name the score right now, but just anyway, my point is it felt like they might have taken that shot a year too early. Mm-hmm. Right. Now there's some value to making your competitors work. Right. We've talked about that where if Bryce West and Aaron Scott used to be locks for me and now I'm dedicating resources to fight you off, that's a win either way because it's resources I've taken from somewhere else. Right.
Yep.
But you're in contention for somebody like that now. Maybe Galloway's coming. Right. There's a Cleveland, Ohio corner. Right. Like I said, it felt like maybe it was a year early, but that's what you do when you've won for 3 straight years, beat Ohio State, blah, blah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In basketball, you don't necessarily have to wait that long, and sometimes you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like, he's got to start taking those shots from day one because, to your point, he could be gone after a year anyway. Right. But, like, you have to start being in contention for these kind of recruits with a McNeely from the jump. You're lucky you've got a couple dudes at Florida Atlantic that are really, really good and feel like they could be a fit coming in. There's some known relationship with the Seagen, right? Like there's some of that stuff exists. But hey, to Dusty May's credit, we'll have to see the results in the short term and then obviously the long term because we're going to have to figure out what's sustainable, right? What kind of program is this going to be? Is it going to be a constant transfer portal, top recruit? We saw, Juwan had the number 1 class one year, right?
Yeah.
Obviously didn't work out with Houston and Diabate, but it's such an interesting world. So, but from the start, I think Derek said something. It's nice to hear some positive Michigan. Yeah. There's just anxiety gone. It's good to be excited about a new era.
Yeah. He just needs Dusty May just needs just a couple of names to get over the finish line here to really get some momentum. And the same goes for Sherrone too. I mean, they're working on recruits and all that stuff. It's happening. They just kind of need a couple to get over the finish line. But, the names that you're hearing that are, that could come over the finish line are strong names too. So they just need the drop. So I think, it just get a couple over the finish line, get a couple of, warm and fuzzy thoughts out there and not just selling hope. And you're rolling.
All right. Well, trying to think here. We've got, let's get out of the way here. So we got a little less than 2 weeks. Obviously not this weekend, but the following week we'll have the spring game, Mesa Blue spring game, Michigan Stadium. Hopefully it's been crazy cold the last couple of years. So hopefully we'll have some decent weather. We'll have Brock, of course, up at the press box, and our boy Dennis, who has gone and been in the stands at the last couple spring games. And he and I were texting back and forth while he was there. He's always made really, really cool and interesting observations. So I'm excited to have him upstairs. I think he's going to pull away some really interesting nuggets that he'll obviously talk about on his show, Michigan Football Live, during the week. And then Josh and I will obviously be covering it as well. With it being broadcast on Fox, that's cool that the amount of access we're going to have this year. I'm excited for that. And then obviously basketball information we're going to continue to provide over at michigan.rivals.com. If you're not a subscriber already, you want to get in there. Josh has been posting this. This is kind of the fun time of the year, especially with its 2 new coaches. It's wild, man.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wild. Yep. So the information is going to continue to roll in. And then because of the extra layover, we didn't really have time to talk about it, but we've got a Frozen Four coming up.
Yes.
Michigan hockey competing for a national championship in hockey. They have before. This is their 8th Frozen Four appearance since their last championship in 98. But like we've talked about, you might remember Michigan football won a championship that year as well. So how about we have some deja vu and see both of these programs bring home a natty? That would be excellent. Yeah. So we'll be talking hockey as those games approach closer and closer as well. Other than that, guys, again, another really, really high viewership for us live here on YouTube. Lots of action in the comment section. We see our regulars or subscribers. I see a lot of new names as well. Love that. So please, if you're listening back on the podcast or watching this on YouTube, make sure you're liking and subscribing. That helps boost us. And also make sure you do the notification bell. So when we do go live, you're sent a notification. You can join the conversation. Again, we want this show to be as interactive as we can. We work for our community and subscribers. We want to talk with you guys. Never feel like we're talking at you. You guys prove on a daily basis you know more than me sometimes, right? So you're feeding us stuff and helping us. So don't ever feel like we think we're above you or anything. We want this to be a group effort here. And we love seeing the viewership go up and seeing you guys continue to come back and ask us questions and give us feedback. So thank you. And then other than that, yeah, we'll try and be back next week, same time, Sunday here, live on YouTube. Hail to the podcast. Thanks for joining, guys.